So we need to train ourselves in mind management. We need to manage our minds. So the messy mind needs to be managed by the wise mind. And that wise mind is the core of our humanity. It's that deep spiritual wisdom. And an example of our wise mind is someone comes to you and asks you for some advice, and you listen to their story and you give them great advice. And you think, geez, why don't I take that advice myself, kind of thing. We're really good at seeing other people's issues. And, we're not always so good at like seeing our own and giving ourselves, taking our own advice. And that's a skill we need to learn. We need to learn to listen to that inner core wisdom and become listeners. And that also comes from like listening to podcasts like yours and learning all this, because the more knowledge that you build, the more you listen, you're actually wiring that into your brain. So along with the experiences of life, we are also wiring in knowledge all the time. And our wise mind will draw down on the knowledge that is good for you. And that's why continued learning is absolutely essential for optimal functioning. So following podcasts like yours and mine are great, because we're giving information that's very much building in the insurance policy networks in our brain that guide us. With this non-conscious mind being so alert at helping to identify the toxicity in us, it'll send these signals too. So the first point of training yourself to listen to the non-conscious mind is to practice the skill of listening to your signals. And we have 4 categories of signals. And those categories of signals are our emotions. Emotions are not illnesses. Emotions are incredibly important. Behaviors, what you say and do and how you say and do it. Your bodily sensations, what your body's telling you, and then your perspectives, how you're looking at life. Those are 4 categories, and obviously they can expand into a multitude of different behaviors and emotions and all that kind of thing. So think of for a moment, just come away from the signals and pretend my hands are scales. Those like old fashioned with a balancing thing in the middle, and you put, you're buying something from those old fashioned shops, and they put the cheese in one side to weigh the
Oh,
amount
and
of
it
cheese.
bounces it. Yeah.
These scales, and then it kind of bounces, and they put weights on the one side. So that's the visual I want you to imagine now. And now all our experiences we have on this side, we've got all our good experiences, and this side, all our bad experiences. And there's a bad, when we're managing our mind via observing our signals and doing all the things that I'm starting to explain, you keeping this balance, because the bad stuff is also telling you stuff. It's not that you want to eliminate the bad stuff. We want to be able to learn from the bad stuff and make it work for us. We want it to become constructive. Because what happens is the bad stuff can get us stuck in guilt, and we don't know how to manage it. So we start tipping, and the scale starts tipping, and then we can dive deep into negative things. So in this side and in this side, we have emotions, we have behaviors, we have perspectives, and we have bodily sensations. On this side, we would have things like depression and bipolar behaviors, and I'm giving extreme states, life sucks, and extreme pain in one's body or something. Now, that's also still, we mustn't see those as bad. We must see those as information. This side would be like good things, like happiness and body feeling great and life's going whatever. So a great conversation like this where we're learning and that sort of thing. So what we want to do, in life with mind management is look at our signals that we are getting. When we get the good signals, don't just gloss over a great conversation or something that pops your mind that just makes you happy. Like, for example, my granddaughter, I just think of her face and it makes me happy. I won't just let it pass through in 1 second. I'll actually stop and take 5 seconds to visualize and recall what it felt like when I saw her for the first time or something like that. And that wires in a network into my brain that is increasing my resilience and unmasking my resilience. So you want to pay attention to the good stuff when you get signaled, when it pops to your mind. You also want to pay attention to the bad stuff, because the bad stuff has also got information. And if you grab it, you control it, and then you're empowered to change it and to make it work for you. Otherwise, it will drag you down and keep you down there. So instead of saying, "Oh, I'm so bad, I'm doing this," because I know you help a lot of men with pornography addiction and that kind of thing. Any kind of addiction is basically it's a behavior. So in this particular scale, pornography addiction would be a behavior. And then there's emotions that go with it, which are guilt, desire, all kinds of things. There's bodily sensations. We can guess what those are. And then there's perspective. Why do I always do this? I'm stuck in this. So that's just a very, very broad example. So instead of saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm so bad, I shouldn't do this," which can start tipping the scales and will just actually make you worse and make the addiction worse. What we need to do is say, okay, well, I recognize that it's a mess. It's okay to be a mess. I'm being messy in this. What can I learn from that? Let me identify those emotions. And then what you do is you start a process. So that's the frame. I've set up the frame, sort of the frame. Now you start the process of saying, okay, what are my actual emotions in this moment? Don't think of in general. Just think in this moment where I'm feeling a bit stuck. And then, just say my emotions, oh, I feel whatever. It could be guilt, it could be remorse, it could be desire, whatever. Just label them. No judgment. Just very clinical, very organized, very deliberate. Then you would go to what are my behaviors in this moment? Once again, just create a sentence. What is my perspective in the moment? What are my bodily sensations in the moment? As you do that, you are gathering awareness of these four categories of signals of how you are in this particular moment. You've now brought, you've now listened to the non-conscious because those signals are basically the non-conscious scanning, finding a thought tree and sending up those signals that are attached to that thought tree. So as you pay attention to them, you bring that thought tree into consciousness. That thought tree is that thing that looks like a tree in your brain and those rolled up things in your body, whatever, everything's activated. And as soon as we know from neuroscience, as soon as you are aware of a thought pattern, not all the details yet, but you've weakened the thought pattern. So you are weakening that network, and that network's what's driving you. So you use the signals to find the network. You then, by doing that, by paying attention, gathering awareness, you then bring it into the conscious mind and you weaken it. Now you are being empowered to take control. So now you go to the next stage, which is now you reflect. Okay, why do I have that emotion? What other emotions do I have? And you ask the why question around the four signals. Then you write that down. And when you write down, it's really important not to write like a journal. Don't go writing whole sentences. If you really want to dig deep and get insight and really activate that network that you can deconstruct it and reconstruct it right down to the roots being the source of where this thing started in the first place, the trunk being how you processed it uniquely, the branches being how it's playing out in your life, and the self talk and all that stuff. You want to dig deep. So the first two stages are helping open the door. It's like literally the door is locked. We can try all kinds of CBT, all kinds of great motivational affirmations, etc. We will not open the door until you go through a very sequential process that aligns with the psychoneurobiological network that needs to be how it needs to be woken up so that you can rewire. And these steps I'm describing to you are doing that. So the first step, gather awareness, opens the door, brings the thought into consciousness, weakens the networks, the proteins, etc., and the chemicals. Then the second step adds to that weakening. And weakening means you can change it. It becomes malleable. Things that are malleable are changeable because you're now deconstructing. And then you're deconstructing right down to the root, which is the source. And then you can reconstruct. You can't eliminate, but you can deconstruct and reconstruct, which is reconceptualizing. So you always remember what happened to you, what you did, how you were, but you're now changing what it looks like. So you're changing how it drives you and therefore how it plays out into your future. So the third step is adding to this ability to do all of this stuff, and that's the right step. And it's important, as I mentioned, not to write in a journal stage. You can do that later, but not now. Now, what you do is just a mind dump. Whatever comes up, you just grab that. So from the gather and reflect, it's stimulated a lot, and you just write as quick as you can all over the page, preferably all over the page, not in lines. If you want to put something like write a sentence, put it in a bubble. Try and write the words, and I know it sounds crazy, but the more patterned, the more colorful, the more you're going to go deeper and create a synergy in the network that digs deeper. Then you're going to stop, and fourth step is you're going to look at what you've written to make sense. What's going on here? What are the patterns, the triggers? This is what's happened. What can I do about this? And so on. Then the fifth step is what's the action I'm going to take today? Now, that is a neurocycle. It's 5 steps of the neurocycle. And that is basically the system for how we can change drive neuroplasticity, which is the changes we want to make in our whole psychoneurobiological network, not just the brain, the mind, brain, and body. And so the neurocycle is how you do that. It's the system. And within that, you can put positive affirmations, cognitive behavior techniques, those kinds of things fit at step 5. Those are your actions. But if you don't have the prior steps, those actions become a band aid. But if you put them at step 5, they become a solution. And so there's a huge difference there. So that's basically how you would start managing the process. Key thing here is if we've got an established pattern, and if you've been doing it for more than one day, then and most likely most addictions have been going on for months, if not years. That's going to require time to change. So habits don't form in 21 days. They also aren't changed in 21 days. From the research I've done and others, and reading a huge amount of research in this area, and I've just published a paper, we're about to publish another paper, we've got a big study running, another paper going at the end of the year. We have been looking, myself and my team, at how long does it actually take to go from that signal, find the root, deconstruct, reconstruct, all that stuff. And it's around about 9 weeks for one cycle. And in that one cycle, that's like one chunk. And you'd work for using the NeuroCycle daily for around 5 to 45 minutes. I wouldn't go longer than 45 because it's very, very tiring and your brain will run out of energy like your cell phone, and your conscious mind. And 5 minutes is kind of the minimum because you've got to get through 5 steps. And some days you'll do 5 minutes, some days you'll do 15. It depends on where you are in that cycle. The first 3 weeks are very overwhelming, very, you grieve, you feel more anxious, more depressed, your emotions are going to be high because you're starting to see stuff and it's very overwhelming and you're starting to deconstruct. By more or less 3 weeks, you're feeling a level of peace and you have a direction you want to go in. So you've healed the roots and you've started growing the what you would like to be, that new thought you'd like it to be. So there's this new little thought, it's this big, not big, and how you were functioning is kind of half the tree, and how you want to function is the other half. If you stop here, you're going to revert back and get very stuck and get very frustrated. So what you need to do is before you start a new cycle, before you just think you've got it, you need to grow that tree and you need to reduce that side that's the toxic side down to just a teeny little branch and make it a nice big green tree. And that requires practicing this each day through the 5 steps for another at least 42 days, another 6 weeks. And I mean that this is honestly that's a 2 to 5 minute process. So the second part is very quick, but you've still got to go through the 5 steps. That grows the tree, the strength of the healthy part reduces the toxic part to a very small, tiny little branch so that you can remember you may be triggered, but you now have the healthy tree that's thoughts with retrieving all the memories and thoughts, a new way of thinking, the new network is now going to be the one that drives you. And sometimes if it's a long-standing trauma, because addictions generally grow out of trauma, and trauma is big stuff. It's what's happened to us, the sexual, the verbal, the war trauma, all these bullying, excessive bullying, all those kinds of toxic breakdowns that happen to us, poverty, racism, etc. That's those are big, and the more complex, the longer they've been there, the more neurocycles you need to do. So you're not going to get away with one neurocycle one day and think you're better. That doesn't work like that. So it's kind of that's kind of the big picture of the whole thing.